Hello, my name is Bianca Andrada. I am currently a sophomore in biomedical engineering, and I'm currently the RA for the engineering and computer science learning community. Something I learned about myself in this position is that you don't need to be scary to be respected. I think when I found out about my wing. So a little backstory about my wing is that I am an RA to 26 amazing and lovely residents that identify as male. So definitely coming to this position, I was scared because as a woman in STEM, I'm always constantly bombarded by males and always being told that I'm not good enough and like I'm just a woman in STEM and to make sandwiches. And especially it being an ECS learning community, I was nervous that this is the type of community I was about to embrace myself into. So I thought to be respected, to take this authority figure serious, to take that position, you had to be scary. You had to take authority right away, show them who's boss and whatnot. And going to this position, and as time went by, I began to realize that being this quote scary RA didn't do much and prevented me from doing what the job is supposed to be, and that's connecting to residents, connecting them to resources that they need. And they weren't getting what they needed because they were too scared to ask me. So I wanted to make a different approach to it. I wanted to be personable, and that's something I learned about myself, is that I am a personable person, and I'm able to take my personality trait of being personable to a respected figure. Just to go back to it, I was able to become more personal with my residents, and I wasn't sure if it worked, but it did. Unfortunately, one night there was an incident where I had to document at least a quite number of them actually. And from then on, I thought, well, our relationship is over. They don't respect me anymore. They hate me because I did this to them. And then suddenly, the following day, I got GroupMe messages from the number that I had documented that night, responding to me in long paragraphs, explaining how they were sorry, not sorry that they did it, but also mostly sorry that they put me in that position, and that they knew I was only doing my job, and they still respect me, and they still see me as the RA that they are, and they don't hate me anyway or feel any sort of feelings against me, because they know at the end of the day I was doing my job. And I think that's what's very important that I learned about myself in this position, is that I don't need to change the way that I am in order to be respected. I thought coming into it I had to be mean or scary. Well, not mean, I wasn't mean, but in sense of like the scary RA stereotype. I thought I had to follow that in order to be respected, but I've realized that I myself have the power to be respected by just being myself and doing what I've been doing. And honestly, to get those messages just proved to me how much I love this position and how you really can have the best of both worlds if you really want it. And what I mean by that is essentially that I was able to still do my job, but still keep the close-knit relationship I have with those residents. I think skills that I gained this year was essentially just being more confident in myself and being confident with things that at first made me feel very uncomfortable. And I think one of those examples is when documenting residents. I would get nervous because it was like, oh, I have to remember the protocol. Okay, I have to take their IDs now. It was a lot to remember, but as time went on, I got so confident and comfortable in this position that I knew what to do in a split second with any scenario I was faced with. I think another a skill is like being able to, I developed this skill where I can be able to find common ground with people that I know nothing about. Like again, I said before, I live in a hall with all my residents are males. So finding that common ground at first was super hard. Like there were some residents I connected well with, while there were some like at first where it seemed like we had nothing in common. But I've realized that I have gained the skill where I can get into the form of, hi, what's your name? Hi, I'm Bianca. And then as that barrier broke down, we started to find similarities in the most randomest things, but it's still a similarity and it's still a common ground. And that's where I was able to take that common ground similarity and develop that into a RA resident relationship where they feel comfortable to come and see me and ask for anything they need in terms of resources. And finally, I think the last skill that I gained, well, I wouldn't say gained because I believe that I had it before, but I feel like has truly developed since I became an RA, is learning from my mistakes. And with the CCI events is an example of one of them, where it was really like a trial and error, like this is what they like, this is what they don't like, this is what they need, this is what they don't need. And it really was pushing me to get to know them more, because I want to create events and CCI events where they will come to and they will benefit. Yeah, I think with the CCI events, I really just started off with get to know you events, where it worked for the first time, and then the second one, like not a lot of people came. So I wanted to create events where it benefited them. And I think two huge ones that really were successful was my pop-up laundry one, where one of my residents said like, hey, I don't know how to do laundry, and then I just knocked on everyone's door. It was like, who doesn't know how to do laundry? And it was very impressive because a lot of them did not know how to do laundry. So I just taught them simple basic things about laundry, how to separate and whatnot, and it was a really fun event. And then another CCI event that I had was, there was a weekend where someone just kept throwing up in our bathroom and missing the toilet. And in addition, that weekend was the weekend, unfortunately, people were getting hurt in the evening time of Syracuse. During the evening time in Syracuse, around either Syracuse campus or even off Syracuse campus. So I wanted to create a CCI event that was beneficial to them. So I did a cups and taught residents how to identify alcohol poisoning. And then I also explained to them what is amity within the student code of conduct. So we broke that down together. And finally, I explained to them how to be safe in Syracuse in the evening time. I really broke it down and explained to them, like, while you're on campus, it is an amazing campus, but when you're off campus, it's a very different environment. And what should you do to be safe? And what type of people are you going to see off campus and whatnot? And why you should be in groups rather than walking by yourself in the middle of the night. If you don't want to walk by yourself in the middle of the night, who can you call? There's DPS who can drive you home. I think overall that event itself was very beneficial because my residents really just understood from that moment, like, wow, how dangerous Syracuse could be if they don't take the proper steps to protect themselves and be safe. I think a skill that I would like to develop a lot more is to be able to be a facilitator and mediator of conversations between residents. This past semester, I haven't really been able to have the opportunity to be a facilitator or mentor between residents because I don't really have that many residents who butt heads in that way. Going forward, if I were to get the position, I would really like this skill to be developed just because I think it's a very important skill to have, especially in the engineering world. In terms of how to do that, if I were to be placed in this situation again where my residents were not butting heads that much and I don't need to be a facilitator or mediator, I would ask if any other RAs would be willing to let me shadow them. And of course, with the consent of two residents that were butting heads and needed to have this conversation, would allow me to sit in and watch how an older experienced RA does it, just because for me personally, I am one who needs to shadow, who needs to see what's going on physically in order to learn how to develop it. I'm hoping to return to the RA position next year because I have to be honest, I enjoyed this job a lot more than I thought when I applied last year. I didn't realize the amount of connections you make in this job. And it's not just connections with your residents, connections you make with the RAs, on that being in your staff or maybe staffs in other halls, the RDs that you meet, meeting your own, and the other ones you meet in other halls, the Office of Student Life, especially, like I said, mentioned ECS LC, the amount of engineering people I've met, that being the career advisors, some professors, other students. I think the amount of connections that I've made through this job is amazing because I honestly did not think this would be a place where you could make that many connections. I think when this situation happened, it was just very heavy. And I think the RA role at the end of the day can play and does play an important role in making the inclusive environment, because at the end of the day, the OSL, Office of Student Life, the RDs, don't live in on the floor that you live in with your residents. You do. You're that person. You are the person who is facilitating this community. And for me, strategies I use to create this inclusive environment is definitely just sitting down or going to people's room and be like, hey, are you okay? What's up? What do you need? What can I do for you? Just asking these simple questions, because when you ask those simple questions, you create a conversation, and that conversation leads to them asking questions to you and what they don't know. I think for my residents personally, then majority of them are white males. They were like, I don't know what white privilege is, or I don't know how I can help as a white male. Like, what can I do? And I think that's the key thing, is guiding them to understanding what can I do to be inclusive in this, to create this inclusive environment, if I'm being honest. So I feel like explaining to them what you know, or showing them to people that know the answer to their questions, does help create the inclusive environment. Because in order to create an inclusive environment, in my opinion, is showing compassion to one another, to include one another. And it's really honestly just simple acts. A lot of my residents didn't know what to do, so I told them, you know how you can help? Why don't you donate some money for Not Again SU? Or why don't you start asking questions to people of color, people of different marginalized groups, and learn. I have 2 international students, and I think another way to make it more inclusive is making sure that majority of residents are informed on what's going on campus, or talking to them about how they feel on campus, or what's going on the campus, like what's the climate like and stuff like that. For my residents who are international students, it was very confusing for them what's going on. And it was a moment where I sat down and was like, okay, so let's just talk about it. What do you know? What do you don't know? And then after a conversation, they did feel informed. And it was interesting because we were talking in the, the main lounge on our floor. And then some of my other residents came in and they were like, hey, are you okay? Are you guys fine? Like, do you need someone to talk to? Do you need anything? I don't know what we can do, but like, if we can do something, can you let me know? And I think in that moment, I realized that it is possible to create the inclusive environment. It is hard to create a conclusive environment also, but I do think it is doable. I think that also just ties into my trait of just being a personal person, and like how I'm just using what I know in order to create this inclusive environment. Obviously, not every inclusive environment is perfect. Not all my residents are gonna be the perfect inclusive resident, but it doesn't hurt to try. It doesn't hurt to try to get through them in some way to try to create it. Because while it may not be the full hallway, definitely if you can just create an environment of it in your hallway, it's going to spread. In terms of specific training I would really like to see is, I'm going to be honest, as a person of color, I identify as Asian. I'm specifically Filipino. During this time, it was heavy. I was going through exams, finals week, and I think specific training I would really like to see is how focusing on RA mental health and RA balance. I know we have the 5 W's on burnout. However, I feel like the 5 W's of burnout was an amazing conversation that was led, but I feel like in terms of the incident that happened, it was a lot harder to cope with it if you were a person of color, because not only were you dealing with the burden of so much schoolwork because exams were being moved around, or essays, but then also again, you would have to be there for your residents when it came to it. I really liked trainings that showed us how to cope with these situations, or what's the healthiest way, or whatnot, something around those lines, because I think it'd be really beneficial for RAs, because I did see a heavier level of RA burnout during that time. So, after experiencing the residential community connections, I think the most beneficial one, in my personal opinion, were the 30-minute conversations. I naturally just like talking to my residents. If I see them in the dining hall, I usually just sit with them, or there have been multiple times where my residents have actually invited me to eat dinner with them. It's actually one of the most amazing feelings in my opinion, because I'm like, wow, like you generally want to eat lunch or dinner with me. If they're studying in the main lounge or downstairs, I usually check up on them, or I'd be like, hey, like sometimes I mean I also have to do my homework too, so I ask if I can just join in and study in with them. And then a lot of my residents go to the Barnes Center, so there are times when I see them there and I'm like, oh my god, hey, how are you, what's up, you're working out, same. I think those conversations are very important, especially when they're caught off guard, because you really could talk about anything in that moment compared to times when if they're in their room and whatnot. I think those were the most beneficial. I learned a lot more about my residents. There were times when I caught them and like they're with their friends and they were introducing their friends and telling me what they were doing or how they met, or if they're on like FaceTime with their parents. I've met multiple parents on FaceTime. It is actually kind of funny the amount I've met. I think those conversations were very important. I got really close to my residents. Also, I realized that CCI events work, but they only work to a certain extent. Obviously not, my residents are ECS students. They got loads of homework, and I understand. I was in their shoes too last year. So it is really hard to get them out because they really want to focus and they really want to finish all their homework, and I understand that. I think the 30 minutes are a lot better because I usually catch them at times when they're not doing their homework and they're not stressing, or they're trying to de-stress. So the conversation is less choppy, like, hey, I need to go do my homework and all that stuff. It's more casual and flowing. And I think a challenge that I have is the way my wing is structured. It's structured where I live in a wing, and but then some of my residents are actually in the main hallway. So a challenge that I feel like I've had was getting to know the residents in the main hallway, more towards the end, the higher side, just because I don't get to see them that much the way the shawl is structured. So I think what I want to do next year as an RA is definitely the kids in the main hallway. I want to like engage with them a lot more in the beginning. I feel like when I engage them a lot more in the beginning, it's a lot easier to try to connect with them than it is when maybe you hit like the first or second week of school, or every time you see them. Oh, another thing is that I know that the residents who are in the main hallway are a lot closer to the residents of another RA compared to my own. So when I do have my own CCI events, they don't really come, I feel like. So I think for next year, or even for this semester, I'm going to try it, is collaborating with the RA that those residents really hang out with in that area, and connect with that RA, and it's like, hey, can we do a CCI event together? Because I definitely do know that if their friends are going, they're definitely going. So I can see that working, and then in that opportunity, try to talk to them a lot more. Of course, I can always just take the longer way on my way back to my room, or check in on them as much as I can. I do knock on their door when I have the chance. I usually go down like the main hallway knocking on doors, say like, hey, what's up, just want to check up, everything cool, anything you need. And I've noticed that they really enjoy that, because so as mentioned before, I think a huge goal I want to have is to be able to expand and develop my skill of facilitating and mediating conversations, because engineering is a huge group work field, and I think that when you do butt heads, it becomes a lot harder to finish an engineering project. Therefore, if I were to develop this skill, I think it would help a lot in my own field. In addition, just the idea of talking to people you don't know, especially with my own residents. And I think that's very beneficial, because in the engineering world, we care about grades, but at the end of the day, we care that they also care about job experience and internship experience. In order to get that is through networking and talking to people and going up to the big guy and introducing yourself. And I've noticed that I've developed that skill of being able to talk to someone I don't know, but I do believe that it can be developed a lot more if I were to get the position again.